The Great Wall of China. We all have a picture of it in our heads, right? This single, incredible line, just snaking its way across a mountain range. It's a symbol of power, of history. But what if I told you that image, the one you're thinking of right now, is mostly a myth?
Yeah.
The real story is so much more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's just rip the Band-Aid off right away. The biggest question, the biggest idea we all have about the wall, is it really one single continuous structure? An unbroken barrier built all at once to seal off China from the rest of the world?
Not even close. The reality is, well, it's a lot messier, a lot more fragmented, and frankly, a whole lot cooler than that simple legend. The Great Wall isn't one thing. It's a collection of many things built over a mind-boggling stretch of time.
And that's really our first big idea here. We've got to stop thinking of it as the Great Wall, singular. We need to start thinking of the Great Walls, plural. What we're actually talking about is this massive, sprawling network of fortifications built by totally different groups of people in different centuries for very different reasons. And you know what's wild? The clue has been hiding in plain sight this whole time, right in the original Chinese name, Wanli Chongchang. Now, that's often translated as the 10,000 li long wall. But here's the thing. In classical Chinese, that number 10,000 wasn't meant to be a literal measurement. It was poetic. It was a way of saying immeasurable or innumerable. So it was never really the great single wall. It was always something more like the immeasurably long wall, or even better, the innumerable walls.
And this slide just drives that point home perfectly. For most of history, people didn't have one single name for these things. Dynasties used really practical, down-to-earth names for their defenses. They call them frontiers, ramparts, barriers. Sometimes they got a little more creative with stuff like the Purple Frontier, or my personal favorite, the Earth Dragon. The whole idea of one single Great Wall is actually a pretty modern invention, something that really caught on when Westerners started visiting and writing about it.
So if it wasn't a single project, just how long did this whole thing take? Well, the timeline is genuinely staggering. This wasn't something that took a few decades, or even a couple of centuries. We are talking about a construction effort that spans 2,000 years. This story starts way, way back, before China was even a unified country. You've got these separate, warring states in the 7th century BC building the very first walls. Then, the famous first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, comes along and connects a bunch of these existing pieces into a sort of early defensive system. Other dynasties, like the Han, would patch it up and expand it. And this is the most important part. The wall that we all picture, that iconic gray stone and brick version, that's almost entirely the work of the Ming Dynasty, much, much later in the game.
So let's talk about that wall, the one we all actually know. And this is the crucial thing to remember. Whenever you see a photo of the Great Wall, whether it's on a postcard, in a travel blog, or in a movie, you are almost certainly looking at a piece of the Ming Dynasty wall.
And the difference between these Ming walls and the earlier versions is just massive. The first walls were mostly made of rammed earth, literally just dirt and gravel packed down really tight. It was good enough to stop some guys on horseback with swords. But the Ming Dynasty, they were facing a much more sophisticated threat from organized Mongol armies. So they upgraded, big time. They built a bigger, stronger, more advanced wall, using super durable materials like kiln-fired bricks and solid stone.
I mean, the Ming Wall wasn't just a barrier, it was a seriously sophisticated military system. They used advanced materials, including, and this is my favorite detail, a mortar that was mixed with sticky rice flour to make it incredibly strong. You heard that right, sticky rice. And it was a whole defensive network, with an estimated 25,000 watchtowers that worked like an ancient telegraph line. They'd use smoke and fire signals to send messages down the line at incredible speeds.
But here's the ultimate historical irony. After all that effort, all that incredible engineering, the mighty Ming Wall wasn't actually conquered. The Ming Dynasty fell because one of their own generals made a political deal with the invading Manchus and simply opened the gates at a critical pass. So the greatest fortification in the world wasn't undone by force, but by a single human choice.
But, to only think of it as a military structure is to miss half the story. The wall's purpose went way beyond just defense. It was a really complex and vital piece of state infrastructure.
Really, you can think of it as the world's longest border checkpoint. It was used to control who was coming in and who was going out. It was a powerful economic tool, allowing officials to collect taxes on goods traveling along the famous Silk Road. And in the most rugged, difficult terrain, the top of the wall itself became a kind of highway, a transportation corridor to move soldiers and supplies quickly.
So what does it all add up to? Well, if you take every single section of wall, every defensive trench, and even the natural barriers like rivers that were officially part of the system, the total length is an absolutely mind-blowing 21,196 kilometers. To put that into perspective, that is more than halfway around the entire planet Earth. Just incredible.
But for all its unbelievable scale, this structure is also incredibly fragile. Even if we're just looking at the tougher Ming sections, this chart shows a pretty stark picture. Nearly a third of it is falling apart, and another 22% is just vanished completely. It's either eroded away or been carried off brick by locals to build their houses. Less than half of it is actually considered well preserved.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the modern myths surrounding the wall, and specifically, the one question that everybody seems to ask.
You knew we had to go here. For decades, the legend has been that the Great Wall of China is the only man-made object you can see from the moon. So, is it true? Can you really see it from space?
All right, let's just settle this once and for all. From the moon? Absolutely not. No way. The best analogy I've ever heard is that it would be like trying to spot a single human hair from 2 miles away. It's impossible. Okay, what about from low Earth orbit, where the astronauts on the space station are? Well, NASA says it is technically visible, but only under perfect conditions, and it's no more noticeable than a highway or an airport runway. In fact, those are often easier to spot.
And if you need the final nail in that myth's coffin, it comes from China's very first astronaut, Yang Luwei. When he got back to Earth, everyone asked him, and his answer was simple and to the point: I did not see it.
So when we strip away all the myths that it's one single wall, that you can see it from the moon, what are we left with? It's not a simple barrier. It's a complex, 2,000-year story of human struggle, ingenuity, and culture. Debunking the legends doesn't make the wall any less great. I think it makes its real story even more profound. Which leaves us with a final thought. What if the wall's real purpose was never just about keeping people out, but about telling a story? A story of human ambition and persistence etched right into the landscape for all of time.